overview of what we're going to cover today. I'll introduce each of the members of our panel, all of whom have been impacted by traffic violence, and they'll tell you a little bit about their story. We'll start with a little bit about me. We'll talk about an overview of the current driver accountability systems. I don't know if everyone can hear me. Thanks. Yeah, driver accountability systems. It's not a term that you use, it's a mouthful, but actually that's how we should be thinking about those systems because they're broken. Each of the panelists is going to talk about their cases and their experiences with traffic violence just for a couple of minutes to orient you in terms of what story they have to tell, just a couple of minutes each. And then they'll go through a second time talking about what, if any, accountability there was for the drivers who were involved in the crashes they're here to speak about. You'll see that there's a myth and reality, or maybe you'll disagree, and we'll have a discussion about whether there's meaningful driver accountability absent what police or authorities would call criminality, which is rarely found. We'll talk about what we've learned and next steps to improve accountability and have some Q&A. So let's start with introductions. I'll just tell you my law firm is a community and mission-based law firm. I'm not exactly like the lawyers you see on the billboards on the New Jersey Turnpike. I do represent people in personal injury cases, but I focus on cyclists and pedestrians hurt in traffic, vulnerable road users. I don't represent drivers. And I provide legal and public policy support for a lot of different organizations who are represented here today doing this great work, as well as organizations in New York, similar organizations doing the work. 10% of our firm's income goes to support those organizations, so we would really like to put ourselves out of a job. I'm based in New York, and that's where most of my work is, but I do have deep New Jersey roots. I just want to mention, so good to be here. Back in high school in the 70s, at Rutgers Law School as an organizer for UMDNJ and the UMDNJ hospitals in the 80s and 90s. And most importantly to me, here's my Strava heat map. I'm all over New Jersey every year leading cyclists around through hundreds of miles of the beautiful roads we have here in New Jersey. So this is a very vital and important living thing for me, is keeping New Jersey roads safe. Just wanted to share that. Let me turn it to Sangeeta for her to give you a brief introduction of why she's here.
So I lost my 11-year-old son in 2011 to a reckless and distracted driver who went through a stop sign. He was on his way back with his father, who's sitting at the back. Since he was 11 years old, he was sitting at the back, wearing his seatbelt. Steve, do you want me to do you have a picture of what happened? He was wearing the seatbelt. The driver was coming up the hill and went through a stop sign, and the driver lives in the same town, which is South Orange. Didn't see this, claimed that did not see the stop sign, blew through the stop sign and hit the rear tire on the right-hand side, passenger side. Our car rolled over to the oncoming traffic, and it was really the oncoming car that hit the roof of our car. My husband survived the crash. The driver who caused the crash wasn't injured. Nikhil was killed instantly. And the driver who caused the fatal crash, the person who caused the crash was totally fine, but the last strike, I think, had like a shoulder injury or something of that nature. Nikhil was only 11 years old, and he was going to start. He had been accepted into a gifted and talented programs at Johns Hopkins. He was going to start his music lessons. He was passionate about music. His life was stolen and cut short, and he never got to realize his dream and full potential.
Thank you for sharing that, Sangeeta. I know it's a hard story to tell every time, and you've been telling it now for a long time, many years, in order to try to save children, so thank you. We're going to get into the accountability issues, and yeah, thanks. I think everyone should feel free to use the microphone to make sure you can be heard. This is Sandor Barcza.
I'm Sandor Barcza. I thank Princeton for hosting us, and I thank Princeton for giving me a scholarship about 70 years ago. And this is the campus where I met my future wife. And then we married in 1960. At 60 years of marriage, in 2020, we went for an evening walk, and my wife decided to turn back, and on the way, on the crosswalk, a teenage driver with a provisional license driving a Gladiator, the heaviest vehicle that Jeep makes, struck her from behind while she walked with the right-of-way in the crosswalk. The driver crossed the double yellow line, cut the corner short, and drove into the wrong side of the street. And you have a diagram to show that.
I do. It's shown.
When I came to her minutes later, my wife was lying deformed on the pavement, screaming of pain. Her screams were so loud that I heard the screams from inside the ambulance after having the door closed on her. The EMS people reported that they had to get special permission to give her a second of the legal doses of fentanyl to lessen her pain. But the pains were only lessened once she was in the hospital. And a few hours later, she died.
Thank you for sharing that, Sandor. Our third panelist, Tatsuo Imaishi, himself was involved in a crash, and I'll just say that Tatsuo did survive this incident of traffic violence, but was left permanently disabled, including an impairment of the use of his tongue, which affects the way that Tatsuo speaks. It's a very difficult thing. I would imagine all of us would experience in the middle of our lives, to have our ability to communicate and how we're perceived change this way through traffic violence, but that's what's happened. So I've got a picture here of Tatsuo, whose work is restoring rare violins at Carnegie Hall, and he can tell us a little bit about what happened to him.
So I'm a violin restorer in New York City. I grew up in Japan and came to US to study violin making, and I've been working in the city as a violin restorer for 25 years now. Also an avid cyclist, grew up cycling, and also using bicycle as a daily form of transportation, and also participated in cycling events and races around New York City. Also, I cycle commute to New York City, where I live in northern Jersey, Oroville. So I bicycle every day and throughout the year or I used to ride. I work right next to Carnegie Hall, so I used to ride every day. But I got struck by a car in November 2023, just so early ago.
Please use the microphone, Tatsuo. I think it'll help.
Yeah. So I got struck from behind. I was going home at night, and yeah, I broke my pelvis, lumbar spine, and my skull. And my skull injury damaged my cranial nerve, which is the nerve for tongue, and my left side of the tongue is paralyzed still. So I couldn't speak and eat for a while after an accident. And after rehab and also speech therapy, I'm starting to recover my speech, but it's still very difficult for me to speak clearly. And yeah, I'm on my road to recovery at the moment.
And this is the rest of Tatsuo's story. Here's the vehicle that struck him, what we call a muscle car, that struck and left him in the street. So now I'm going to just try to frame a little bit of this discussion, New Jersey driver accountability, broken systems. Well, let me just start with why do we need accountability at all? We know that Vision Zero in part is engineering fixes to bad traffic design or road design because we understand that people make mistakes. And that is, of course, very important and a critical core part of Vision Zero, or Target Zero, as we call it here in Jersey. But there are drivers who are going to be able to engage in reckless misconduct in traffic no matter how good the engineering fixes are and no matter how good the education is. So what's the point of accountability? Well, certainly it can play a deterrent effect. If people are held accountable for the harm that they cause, they may not do it again. Others who see them being held accountable may say, I'm not going to do that. I don't want that to happen to me. There is also a value to accountability to the victims of traffic violence. People want to see that there is justice done on some level, and we do a very poor job of delivering that justice to people. And let's talk about how we do it. You know, first thing is the criminal justice system, and sometimes I have people who come to me who want me to represent them in connection with the death of their family member, and they feel frankly vengeful. They're angry, and they want a highly punitive response applied, and they want to see a homicide prosecution against the driver who killed their child, or their spouse, or their parent. And I have the difficult job of explaining to them that that's not how our system works. Except for certain, what I will call pigeonholes of criminality, there is no response by the criminal justice system, and you'll see this when we go through the stories of each of our panelists. What are the pigeonholes of criminality? There are things like drunk driving, impaired driving, driving while fleeing from a police chase. Depending on where you are, they may include hit and run or they may not. They may include things like driving without a license, or maybe in some parts of Jersey that doesn't really matter so much. But if you're not within one of these pigeonholes of criminality, it really, you have to do something absolutely crazy in order for the criminal law, the criminal justice system to pay attention. And outside of these pigeonholes of criminality, driver accountability has been decriminalized. You have traffic tickets. You have, the New Jersey Motor Vehicle Commission, which can apply points to your license, which can lead to increased insurance premiums. It could lead to a license suspension. And then you have civil lawsuits. Civil lawsuits are really stigmatized as something that greedy, small-minded people do after life has dealt them a bad hand by the insurance industry. But I would suggest that if you look beyond how the insurance industry feels about these civil suits, you'll see that there is almost the only way you can get justice outside of these criminality scenarios that I just alluded to is by bringing a claim for civil justice. And what you find there is that no one cares about holding the drivers accountable. So these are where people get justice nowadays. At the Motor Vehicle Commission, not much, municipal court, or maybe in a civil lawsuit. And that's what people are looking for, not to win the lottery, but to give some meaning to the loss they've experienced of their family member, of their ability to speak or function or normally they've enjoyed their whole lives, to give some meaning to what's happened to them, and our system does not give that to them. So let's talk and go back to Sangeeta and talk about her experience dealing with government authorities in connection with the fatal crash that killed Nikhil.
So Steve, you talk about criminality. So Nikhil has a younger brother who was 6.5 years old at the time of the crash. When we broke the news to him, his first question to us was, what's going to happen to the driver who killed my brother? Is that person going to jail? Spoken as a 6.5-year-old, but clearly understands what needs to happen, right? While the other judicial system does not, a 6.5-year-old understands that that's what needs to happen. This person who killed my brother should be behind the jail, should be behind bars. So in our case, the driver who had traveled, like I've mentioned, that rode many a times, claimed did not see the stop sign and essentially was issued 2 summons. One was for reckless driving and one was for blowing the stop sign, and was fined $206. Then clearly when we had the investigation, I would say that South Orange Police Department was doing their, business as usual investigation. They did have a regular homicide detective come out and investigate. They did bring the crime scene people, but it was 2 days later when you know what it is, even with a murder, right? When there is an intent to kill, 2 days later, means evidence is destroyed. So for them to come out 2 days later and try to see the tire tracks and all was just too late. So there was no criminality. When we met with the Essex County Prosecutor's Office, it's always considered traffic death, inevitable. There's nothing we can do about it. There is no cost for a life lost on roadways. In the municipal code, my husband was allowed to be there. However, he was not allowed to give a statement. The other driver was allowed to give a statement, and the driver did provide a statement. I wasn't there in person, my husband was there, and there was no remorse. But everyone else perceived that the person is very remorseful. But what happens to the family of the victim? We did not get to provide any impact statement about us. At the same time, there was another driver there who was driving unlicensed and was fined $700. Meanwhile, this driver who killed my son was fined only $206. That's the cost of taking someone's life. We fought to get the person's license suspended, and we were told that that's never been done. And if it has never been done, then we are going to do it this time. And so we were very, we persevered and we were relentless. And the license was suspended for 15 months. Again, this was done in the New Jersey Motor Vehicle Accident Unit in Trenton. We were not even made aware of the date. We did not even provide any impact statement. Again, the other driver was allowed to provide an impact statement. So in every instance, they never asked us anything. The people who are suffering, it was always the other party that was able to defend the actions that they took. Is there anything else I missed, Steve?
No, I think that covers it. I'm going to ask Sandor to talk about the accountability issues that arose in the case involving the death of his wife, Ava.
As I mentioned before, my wife was killed. The driver was right back driving in our neighborhood where my daughters live and grandson lives. I have to go by. The driver faced no meaningful consequences for this reckless act in killing her. The failure of accountability for the driver started with the failure of the police to consider even gathering the evidence, let alone leading to consequences for the driver. For example, the vehicle position and angle determines the trajectory, which is documented. And it was stated in the report that neither the vehicle nor my wife was moved after the crash. But there was nothing made of the fact that the position and the angle of the vehicle determines a trajectory which, if made visible, clearly proves that he crossed the double yellow line when he turned short. The most flagrant omission of the police, in my opinion, was that they did not record how far the Jeep had thrown her, which in my recollection was 10 to 15 feet. And it would have been elementary and very easy to measure that distance, and it would have been the only objective indicator of how fast he was driving. There was a dispute about the lighting on the scene, which the driver claimed that rendered my wife invisible. The driver's cell phone showed that there was a text message that he received at the approximate time of when he struck my wife. The police discounted this because there was no evidence that he was actually sending a text message at the time of the crash. Well, reading a text message while driving is no less distracting than sending one. The sloppy police report, which they only revealed to me after 3 months and several requests, and not completely, had a diagram claimed to be the quote to scale, did not display two of the key features which would have shown his faults. Do you have that up, or?
I did. We covered it, and we're on to this issue of what penalty he received, the sole penalty he received, which was having to retake his driver's ed exam.
Well, let me emphasize that the diagram that the police generated shows nothing of the yellow line that he crossed.
Here's the diagram. I'll put that back up.
And it shows a striped crossing, which is irrelevant because that was not the crossing where my wife went home. The crossing was here, and it should have been shown as a striped crossing. It's the vehicle, and that's the crossing that my wife took on the way home. And she was struck here by the gladiator. What do gladiators do? They kill people. The police did not ticket the driver. The prosecutor stonewalled us. The Division of Motor Vehicle allowed the young man to drive already after 2 days. I live nearby and must pass there and see that the family still has and uses the same vehicle, although with a different license number.
And I did just include something in the presentation about this driver's history with driver's ed. This is in discovery in the civil case. We took discovery with a subpoena from the high school where this student took a driver's ed course. And you can see up here the questions and the answers. What is keeping to the right? Well, it's not go crossing over the double yellow to make a quick sweeping turn the way this driver did. What was his answer? Motorists must keep as close to the right side of the road except when passing a car or vehicle. Okay. What are the 5 things we should yield to? 1, you got to list all 5. Emergency vehicles, trains, buses, postal vehicles, and motorized assistance. What's missing? What's missing? And then number 8, what could the fines go up to for not yielding to pedestrians in a crosswalk? I'm sorry, but if I was taking this test, I would have gone back and changed one of my answers in the last question. I would have said pedestrians, but he didn't. But he knew, oh, it could be $500. But this driver didn't pay a penny. This insurance company paid a lot of money. But the driver didn't pay a penny, and that's not accountability.
That's a slap on the wrist. Overall, it's revolting that the authorities were so clearly biased in favor of the driver. Justice was not served. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Sandor. Tatsuo? Tatsuo's case is still in progress. It's actually in the early phases, but it raises a lot of the same issues already that you've heard about from Sangeeta and Sandor, so I'll let you proceed.
So, my accident,
Yeah, use the mic, it's a good idea.
As you mentioned, I got struck from behind, riding on a straight road, and it was hit and run. A driver took off after cycling, and I have been bike commuting for over 20 years into New York City, and also I rode bicycle in Japan as well. And this is something I didn't start since the pandemic. I've been doing this for many years, so I know how to maneuver, and I know how to navigate the street. But this was my first time getting hit by a car, and also getting hit from behind. There was no way for me to avoid or defend myself, and I have the sense of not having any control over my safety. It really it hurt me, and also learning that this driver, the nurse, it off. It just made me lose all the trust that I had in motorists, which is essential for me to stay on the road. I mean, without trust of motorists, and I had to motorists, yeah, it really scares me riding on the road. And also the fact that he got away with one traffic
Right,
Yeah.
so what happened was the driver appeared, he got 2 tickets from the police who found him in his vehicle. It's kind of outrageous, right? I showed you where's that lemon yellow muscle car, right? Let's just go back. So here's this guy, he's driving this car, he hits Tatsuo, and you can tell from this car that this guy really cares about his car. Let me go back to just those images that I had of it. I'm sorry.
The lime green Dodge is a chocolate.
Yeah, I'm looking for that image of the car because he hits Tatsuo and then he just drives. He lives 4 blocks away. But he just parks it in front of his house like it's no big thing. Even though, there's so much damage on it that the side view mirror has been knocked off. There's various other sorts of scratches, and here we go. He must have known he hit something. You don't hit something with this car causing this damage and other damage on the car and not know it. But he just parks. And the reason people do that, typically, we don't know this, we're in discovery in this case, is because they've been drinking. And they don't want to be tested after they hit someone. So this guy just left Tatsuo there. So what was the response? Were 2 tickets, one for leaving the scene of a crash and the other for failing to report the crash. The driver's appearance in municipal court, they didn't tell us about it. It was just like, you at least knew when it was going to happen. You weren't given a chance to speak, you were muzzled. We didn't even get a chance to go. And what happened in court? Well, the driver got a lawyer, the driver got their employer to give a character reference, and they pleaded down to failure to report, a single violation which was upheld. Here's the driver's employer's note. Visibility severely limited, an unfortunate event without Sandy's awareness. There was no limitation on visibility. It was night, there were street lights. Tatsuo was lit up like a Christmas tree in high visibility gear, lights, and reflectors. This driver had headlights on his Charger. He could have seen. The burden on the driver of holding him accountable. This guy has a job. We can't deprive him of his car because then it's going to impact his job. We need him at work. He needs to earn a living. He needs to support his family. That's true. These are people who commit these acts of traffic violence. Tatsuo is a person too. So are Sangeeta and Sandor and their families. Why are they given such short shrift? So what happened? Here it is. This is the disposition. Failure to report an accident, which is what you do when you scrape someone's car in the parking lot of the supermarket and no one gets hurt, but you don't report it. Yes, with a civil reservation, meaning no possibility of any criminal liability. And then leaving the scene of an accident involving personal injury, it was dismissed. Who knows why or how or on what basis? So what's next? New Jersey is trending to become one of the most dangerous states in the US to walk in. It's also dangerous to bike in as well. We've already heard about the Target Zero Commission, which is a body that's supposed to move forward a policy. And accountability for drivers needs to be a part of that. Engineering is in the lead, making streets safe is in the lead, but we have more we need to do. There's a bill called the New Jersey Crash Victims Bill of Rights that would give people notice and an opportunity to be heard when the driver who struck them, is being brought up on charges in one of these municipal courts or some other forum. And it's an important reform that we need to get in New York and in New Jersey. Notification of the defendant's court dates. I have been and I have led families with their supporters with signs to appear at the Department of Motor Vehicles in New York, because even just shaming drivers, I think, has some value. It gives some accountability to them for what they do. The thing is not to necessarily, unless it's warranted, throw them in jail and throw away the key. but they've got to have some experience that they have violated the norms that we all live by. I think that is the critical point that gets lost here. And what you keep hearing throughout Sandor's case and Tatsuo's case, and I'm sure you heard it also, Sangeeta, you have to think of the trauma to the driver. The driver's trauma is so serious, and what are you trying to do? Ruin the driver's life? Is that why you're pursuing some claim? Because you just want vengeance? No. People are looking for justice and some kind of an affirmation of the norms we all live by that Tatsuo spoke about. The norms that make us feel safe in traffic. Because driving is the most dangerous thing most of us ever do. And people treat it like it's running the toaster in the morning. You know, we need to get better driver's education and meaningful license suspension after crashes. We need better resources so that the ball isn't dropped the way it was so badly dropped in Sandor's case. We need retesting of drivers by the Motor Vehicle Commission based on violations, because some of the best drivers at a certain point in life lose their ability to drive safely, and I see this oftentimes in my practice. Career professional drivers with an absolutely clean record making a really bad mistake in traffic because they're in their 80s and their 90s. And it's something that we just don't pay attention to but needs to be addressed. Everyone should consider getting involved and be active with their local police, street safety, and victim rights organizations. Do not shirk jury duty, because the civil trials that follow from these crashes sometimes are the only chance for crash victims and their families to get meaningful justice and affirmation by a jury, which is part of, the government saying, yeah, this person was wrong and they did this, they caused this harm, and they should be held accountable. So thanks so much for coming, and we're going to spend a little time on questions and answers. But I do just want to pose one question to the panel first. A lot of times there's this notion that cyclists or people who promote cycling or walking are all liberals, and it's conservatives or Republicans who are in favor of freedom and liberty, and people put this political overlay on traffic safety issues. And to me, that makes absolutely no sense, because we should all want people who cause harm carelessly to be held accountable in some way. I think we all expect it, right? But in our cases, the 18-year-old who killed Sandor's wife, the judge crammed down our throats a gag rule preventing us from using his name. Or let us know we were going to have a real mountain to climb at trial in order to prove liability in a case that should have been open and shut. And in Tatsuo's case, his employer wrote in, well, this is the only African-American male nurse at our facility, and you don't want to do this to this person. So yes, the people involved in these crashes are real people with real lives. And this is a very difficult question of what is the right amount of accountability. They're not wholly evil villains, but they shouldn't be able to get away with a slap on the wrist. So I would ask each of the panelists to talk about where should that line be drawn. Why don't you start, Tatsuo?
So, when I asked help to Mr. Vaccaro, I'm not trying to destroy the driver's life. I didn't ask him to go destroy his life, or I'm not trying to get millions and millions of dollars out of this. But the lost trust that I actually stopped riding in New Jersey. Actually, I'm back on the bike now, but I drive to George Washington Bridge, and I ride my bicycle from there into New York City. And actually, I feel safer riding in New York City than in New Jersey because of that lost trust that the people who hit someone, injure someone, can get away with just a traffic ticket. What's gonna stop them from doing it again? And I don't know where that the amount of punishment. I don't know where that needs to be. But I don't. The person who hit me, driver, has his life. I'm not trying to destroy, but just having a traffic ticket, I don't think it's right. And it just made me lose all the comfort and trust I had on navigating the streets. So yeah, that's where I stand.
So it has to be enough to restore the social fabric, which sounds
Yeah,
really kind of airy-fairy and gauzy, but it's actually quite real. Sandor, and we're going to have questions.
Just one question.
We're not doing that now. We're just
gonna.
gonna let Sandor speak and Sangeeta speak, and then I'm gonna ask you to pose your question. Sorry. Yeah, Sandor?
In my opinion, as vague a notion I have of the definition of reckless driving and careless driving, I think the bar should be close to careless driving and not at or above reckless driving. That's my feeling. And I should add that whatever judges, DMVs, police allow to be publicized should save lives of other people in the future. These things should be publicized. They should be very effectively taught at driver education classes. And newsmen should be informed and allowed to write about these cases. And that, again, I think would be very effective as a deterrent to save lives of other people in the future.
Thanks, Sangeeta. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Oh, I have many thoughts, Steve. This is, we don't have enough time to cover that, but I definitely think we need to have harsher penalties on these people. We need to send a message out, because right now the message we're sending is that it's okay to kill somebody. And also the culture that we have right now, even with the legislators and everyone, is that traffic deaths are inevitable, people are going to die, so it's business as usual. The other thing I also think that the person who causes the crash should also serve some community service, and they should go and tell their story on how they killed someone. That is the only way we can get out of this. I mean, there has to be, like you talked about, shaming them, but that's the way we have to get it done. Like what it means when you kill someone. I mean, it's very easy for someone to, like in most of the cases you said they were sympathetic to the driver who caused the crash. It was the same with us as well. In our case, the driver had lost their daughter 5 years ago to cancer. And that is what struck in everybody's mind. Oh, this person has lost their daughter too. So they know what it is. Well, they lost their daughter because of cancer. My son was killed because of this person's negligence. And there's also a difference between negligence and reckless driving. And everyone is, oh, she was just being negligent. I think that whole culture has to shift, and only then we'll make some progress.
Thanks. I'm so sorry I cut you off.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to know if what was something they would like to see done. Okay, and the truth did, just the young man at the beginning, that's what I was wondering. What would he want to be done for the person that did it to him?
Okay, well, I'll just elaborate a little bit. We tried very hard in our negotiations with the insurer for the family of the teenage driver who killed Sandor's wife to negotiate non-economic relief. I've done this in a number of cases where we have traded off dollars and agreed to take fewer dollars in return for the driver agreeing to voluntarily give up their license because the Motor Vehicle Commission wouldn't do it, but they sign an agreement that says, and if they're caught driving for the next period of time, they pay a huge financial penalty. We've done that. with, in this case, that was rejected. We said, well, how about having this teenage driver make a film? We'd even allow their name to be anonymous and their voice and face to be obscured, but they'd say, hey, I'm a teenage driver in New York City, in New Jersey, who went through driver's ed, and I thought I knew how to drive, and I was given this giant Jeep on my 18th birthday to drive around, and I killed my neighbor. And I did it because I was looking at my phone, because a text message came through. That could be a very powerful teaching device in high school driver's ed classes. They said, absolutely not. That family said, absolutely not. We'd rather pay, I'll put another 0 on that settlement figure than have our son's life ruined by having to do this, even though it was proposed it could be done anonymously. So people do not want accountability. They want to hide, and they want to say it's just the system that all of us have bought into. Yes and yes.
So I just wanted to talk about the victim Bill of Rights that you mentioned, and I think you made a statement that there should be no jail time and there should be no repercussions. I would want everyone to think of it as, what if I gave you a very dangerous weapon, okay? And I said, if you use it a certain way, you could kill someone. Wouldn't you use it carefully? Wouldn't you use it safely? And so even if it was a mistake, you would still be accountable for it. So I think it should be along the same lines. When you cause a crash, it should be investigated in the same way as you would when you have a dangerous weapon. Your car is a weapon. It can really injure someone, or and also kill someone. So that's fine.
I really appreciate that statement, and I'll just say that people don't recognize the destructive force of vehicles, but part of it is just car blindness. We know that 40 to 50,000 people are killed every year in the United States by cars, but somehow the belief is that we all kind of agreed that we might end up being one of those 40 to 50,000 people, or our kid or parent or spouse might be. I didn't agree to that. But somehow, if it happens to you, you're supposed to be quiet and go cry in the closet until you're done. And then turn the page, start a new chapter, because accidents happen. And that attitude towards crash victims, combined with the light slap on the wrist to drivers, because, well, we all knew it was going to happen, it's not an appropriate system, and it is absolute injustice to the families represented here. Holly?
Yes, the 40,000 people a year killed in traffic violence is catastrophic. Doesn't that kind of line up with gun violence?
Yes,
Right? The
yes.
numbers are pretty similar. And the responsibility aspect. What we're talking about right now is the responsibility on the part of the driver and the possible repercussions to the driver. And all of that is so true. But there's a bigger problem, which is lobbyists who are at the auto industry and the asphalt, gas, all of the industries that enable people to use our roads, and how they influence lawmakers at the top. So the auto industry wants everybody to drive because it's a basic human right? It's not, obviously, but that's the way they kind of present it. And driving is such a great, wonderful thing. We all know it's a privilege, it's not a right. But if we have our brains hijacked by the auto industry and then this culture all the time that the driver is exonerated into journalism, that almost every journalistic and crash report is going to sometimes name the victim, rarely name the driver, and say that the car hit the person, the car,
Right,
not
yeah.
the driver. So the responsibility all the way down from the top is taken away from the driver. It's in such subtle ways that I think I know really the only way we can do this is to lobby constantly to our legislators about how laws should be changed and how, because our brains have been literally hijacked. I mean, I think it's inescapable. Even as a driver of bicycles and walker myself, I sometimes catch myself not paying attention to somebody who's approaching a crosswalk. And I'm horrified, but that's what I kind of feel like I'm in my car.
I really appreciate those remarks, and they're so well taken. But in addition to changing laws, I do think it's important, and one of the key lessons we hoped to come up with from this panel is that it really also is something we can each do ourselves through education, through educating our children who are learning to drive, other people we know, and actually taking personal responsibility for our own actions. I've got you after him in the back.
So I just wanted to thank all the panelists for sharing their story. Very moving, and I'm sure it's very taxing. I'm sorry. I wanted to thank everybody for sharing their story. I'm sure that it was very taxing to go through that the same way, to tell this story over and over again. You mentioned the political lens on this. There is research that shows that at least certain political ideologies tend towards hierarchies, and I do think that there is some of that playing a role in the sense of like a driver being higher up on that hierarchy over somebody who's walking. There's a sort of built-in assumption of socioeconomic status and all of that. With regards to the political lens, what I was wondering is when advocacy is done on trying to get accountability for drivers, like there's that underlying thing that I believe is what's mostly going on, as well as the what was mentioned about the auto lobby corruption and all of that. But what is the actual responses that you guys get from lawmakers when you try and do that advocacy in terms of pushback?
I think that some of our panelists are the best ones to answer that. Thanks.
So, during advocacy for the Target Zero Commission law, we did hear from legislators again. They kept saying, and again, it was very political. We saw that going in, and the questions always, or the statements they made was, we're never going to get to zero. We're never going to get to zero. People are going to die. That's what it is. I mean, so it is, like I said, they just think it's inevitable and it's going to happen. And in fact, one of the Families for Safe Streets New Jersey members was testifying and said over there, wait till it happens with you or your family, and then we will see what you have to say. But exactly that is what it is. And it's with us as well. Until it happens with you, nobody thinks that this is an issue. And we hear that everywhere. So yes, but we do have some legislators that are, very sympathetic to our cause and are pushing for the legislation, just like the Traffic Crash Victim Bill of Rights. It's really giving access to information, all the information that Sandor did, that you did, Tatsuo. So, getting that detailed report, any of the audio tapes or the body cam images, getting information to all of that, having us, the victims and their families, provide an impact statement, being notified of that. So that's going to be part of it. Essentially, treat us as victims of crime, because traffic violence is a crime, and that's what that bill is. In terms of compensation, so many people, suffer serious injuries also. So that's part of the Traffic Crash Victim Bill of Rights. It was just dropped this Monday, that bill. So hopefully we can get it passed sometime soon. But, it's not going to bring our loved ones back, but hopefully we can at least help and prevent further tragedies.
And just to make a quick additional point back to what you were saying, if it's inevitable, then you better armor up. And if it's inevitable and you don't have the money to armor up, it's kind of your fault, right? If you're riding a bike or walking, what were you doing out riding a bike or walking in your neighborhood? That's the implicit attitude, I think, all too often. Sir?
Yeah. So it's kind of a two-part question. The Victims' Bill of Rights sounds like a great step. I'm curious if we have a sense for how much support there is in the legislature for that, how heavy of a lift it is. And then the second question, I was really shocked to hear the difference in the different law enforcement agencies' level of helpfulness. That in Essex, they were helpful, in
Morris,
other communities.
in Bergen less so.
In Bergen less so. And I'm curious if you feel like there's a role in terms of advocacy, local advocacy, to try and make sure that police departments are at least doing what they're allowed to do under the current law to support victims.
Sandor, I think if you could speak a little bit after we were done with the civil lawsuit arising from the death of Eva Barcza, there was a meeting in Mountain Lakes, New Jersey, which is where Sandor lives and raised his family. There was a meeting with the local police department, and there was a request made to come and raise these issues. And what happened?
Well, they started out by the police having an open house at the local library, where my daughter and myself submitted a question or a request to talk about our case in the open house. The police refused that and said that we should do that privately. So after many phone calls, we finally, one of my daughters and myself, succeeded in meeting the police chief. And I more or less outlined what I felt they neglected to do or did wrong. And there was another, a little gentler, but pretty much effectively a stonewalling. He said that, oh, the police cannot have $10,000 laser-based rangefinders to measure the distance. And I said, there is a ribbon which you use to block the street that has a repeating pattern on it that can very well be used as a measuring tape. And there is chalk also, which would outline where the body ended up.
Old school.
On the street.
Low tech.
Yes, but it's very effective.
Yes.
And that didn't go anywhere. And also, we also requested that we not only talk with the police chief, but someone on the prosecutor's office. Actually, the prosecutor and the sheriff were both at the police open house meeting and heard when we submitted our question, and afterwards promised to meet us. Where we are still waiting to meet the prosecutor or somebody responsible from that office, and to meet the sheriff or somebody responsible for him.
Yeah, I think that the problem here is that in the case of traffic violence, it's the victim who's stigmatized, not the perpetrator. And you become, oh, it's those weirdos down the street who are turning out at the public library to complain to the police that, you know, yeah, someone got hit, or, you know, they want to see a prosecution, they want vengeance or vindictiveness against their neighbor. You know, we just want government to function and deliver justice in some form that's cognizable, noticeable. We're going to have to leave soon, but there's one question here and also in the back. So first you.
I want to seriously ask, what can we do about the overpopulation? Because if you ask me, there's too many cars, the infrastructure can't handle it. I lived in South Jersey, I lived a few years in the Midwest. This state is too overpopulated. I mean, you can't do anything about it. But the aggressive driving on 195, they think that's the Autobahn. They'll go 90 miles an hour on your bumper. And it's okay to go 30 miles over, and it's okay to drive in the left lane because that's the fast lane. That's what people say. It's the passing lane in South Jersey. It's, you know, you have to go only maybe 5 over the limit, and then you get in trouble for that. Little states like, little areas like Cranberry have the 25 sign up. You can't go over 25 in Cranberry anywhere, except out by the warehouses.
Well,
but like, I don't need to go on. What do you do about
This is
this?
what I would say. Look, I live in New York City in Manhattan, and it's extremely dense, far more dense than most any part of New Jersey. We use mass transit to move people, not private cars. We have congestion pricing to limit the amount of the private cars. and it reduces the number of crashes, and it makes traffic interactions, which is the main way that we deal with strangers in our lives. We confront them in traffic, into a personal interaction instead of being inside a box with smoke glass windows where no one knows who anyone else is, and you just do whatever you please and people are completely dehumanized. You make traffic interactions into human interactions, and then you just have to hope that people will act like upstanding human beings. What else can we do?
Public transit, bus.
In the back?
Yeah, having been back through the system and having experienced firsthand the lack of alignment and sympathy that the powers that be have with the victim, it comes to mind that we need to create, using the criminal justice system as a standard for evaluating all the crashes, 40,000 crashes that happen, maybe more that happen every year. We need to have another system which is solely focused on traffic crashes and have punishment that is commensurate with what's actually happened on the street. So yeah, you don't necessarily need to send somebody off to jail for a year for having committed some, a crime. But with wanton negligence, yes, that should be on the table. It doesn't exist right now because they hold the criminal justice system and they apply it to what's happened on the streets. So now, it doesn't rise to the level of incarcerating somebody. I was told when I said we need to really take action over here. This was wanton negligence. No, it wasn't. This happens. And incarceration was not even, they thought I'm sorry, you're not from this country. That's not the way we do business.
Right.
So we need to have another system. And I think we can actually, if everybody gets together and we advocate for it, I think we can try getting some small idea passed where you have more accountability and punishment at a lower level. And that will be a deterrent for people, because right now they feel they can do whatever they want and nothing's going to happen.
That's the unfortunate problem. We have time for one more question. Yes.
I want to thank you all for sharing your stories. I can't imagine what you've all been through and the courage it takes to be here. So thank you for that. But I wanted to follow up on the deterrent issue.
Okay, sure.
Because, we change the speed limits, we do all these things, but unless they're being enforced, everyone just, I live on that Grove Street that we talked about in the last meeting, the Essex County Road, and they just got the speed limit down to 25. I'm doing my 25. Do you know that a guy went around me, crossed the yellow line, and asked me, what? So I always ask, why don't we have the cameras?
Yeah,
And I heard that
I was just going to say that to
New
you.
Jersey has a law that we can't use the cameras.
Well, there's in New Jersey, you cannot use cameras. So here's what it is. We know most of the traffic bureaus in all the municipalities are skeletally staffed, and they cannot enforce the law. We definitely need automated enforcement, and we're working on that legislation right now. Is it going to be a heavy lift? Sure. But we knew Target Zero was going to be also, and we got that passed. So yes, we are seeing that in New York City, we are seeing it in Philadelphia, we're seeing it in Maryland. All our neighboring states and cities are doing it, and they're successful, and I think that's what we need to show. But it's very, again, politically biased right now.
And just to sharpen that, in New York City, more than 90% of the traffic tickets that are issued on the basis of cameras. Okay, we have pretty much gotten police out of the business of retail traffic enforcement. Yes, they're out there patrolling to see if someone does something crazy that wouldn't necessarily trigger a camera, and it's good that they are, and we do need that, but we don't need police to be bogged down with all of these violations. And what you find with automated enforcement is that at least 80% of the people, they get hit with a ticket once and they don't violate it again, because you see their license plate doesn't come up again. Most people learn their lesson. There's still that hardcore of people who don't, for whatever reason. And then you have other programs and other ways of dealing with them. But if you can get rid of 3/4 or 4/5 of the problem with automation, do it and solve all the other problems with person-to-person interactions, traffic stops with police officers that we all know are a very serious problem. The problem with people getting special consideration if they have a PBA card in their wallet and they get stopped. We get rid of all of that. But people don't want it. They say it's just a moneymaker. Those are people who haven't lost a family member to traffic violence. So I'm going to let folks go to lunch. Thank you so much for coming.